Every platformer needs some kind of user interface to display some important information like lives, coins gathered, power-ups, that kind of stuff. In this couple of lessons we are gonna make the assets to create a super simple user interface for our game. Now, we don't need a fancy illustrative UI. In fact, for this type of game, the best type of UI is gonna be a simple one that won't occupy too much space and don't distract from the game experience. So in this lesson, we're gonna draw the main couple of assets that we are gonna need. And then we are finishing the last steps in the final illustration when we have all the other assets in place, just so we can make some adjustments a bit more informed of with what is the UI gonna interact. We need a heart counter. Most Mario games don't have damage counter, but this isn't a Mario game. It's our own game and we can do what we want. So let's make the hearts. Making hearts is basically vector illustration 101, but I want to show you a nice technique that you can use to make any type of symmetrical asset. One thing before we start, in this lesson I'll draw the hearts the width of one tile, but since this is meant to be the UI, most likely we'll have to adjust the size to fit the final composition. Okay, grab the pen tool and place the points just like I'm showing you now. This is gonna be 1/2 of our heart. Adjust the position and handle of these two nodes till you're happy with the shape. And then select the two nodes and transform them to smooth type to introduce the roundness. Now switch to the object tool and hit Ctrl D to duplicate it, holding Ctrl so it's constrained to the horizontal axis. Move it to the other side, and then hit the H key to flip it horizontally. I think you get what we are gonna do now. Move it so the two nodes in the middle intersect. And here we are taking advantage of a nice little feature of the node tool. We can join two nodes even if they belong to completely different objects. Once those two nodes join, the two objects will join into one as well. So with the pen tool, first select both half hearts, and now you should see all the nodes from both objects. Just select the two nodes in the middle and click on the Join Selected Nodes button. This one over here. Now that you join those two nodes, the two halves become a single path, but that doesn't mean that the nodes at the bottom automatically joined. So go in there and join the two nodes with the same button and close the path. Give it a nice red color. And remove the stroke. And that's it. This technique can be used with pretty much every symmetrical object you want. Now there is a path effect that gives you a much more robust set of tools for creating mirrored paths, but I think that's a bit overkill for the more simple shapes like this one. Now let's add a couple of details to make the heart nicer looking. First let's add a shadow. Nothing fancy, just grab the pen tool and draw a shadow over the right side. When you're done, use an intersection to remove the excess. And now give it a shadow color. For the highlight, I want to make something slightly different. I want to roughly imply that this is something like a glass or some shiny material like that. Now to make something like a realistic glass material would be considerably more complicated, and I don't want to waste that time in a simple UI lesson, but I want to do something different. The highlight is gonna be just a couple of ellipses with a very intense highlight color, almost white. This is how a glass-like material captures highlights, usually with two ellipses, one big and one or two smaller ones at the side. Okay, now to give it something extra. Instead of making the single dark outline like we've been doing, we're gonna create a white outline to further give the impression that this is a shiny surface. Believe me, it will help a lot. You know the drill? Duplicate the main shape, remove the fill and give it a white stroke. This stroke is gonna be smaller than the bigger darker stroke that we are gonna make in a minute, so give it a smaller pixel width. Then send it to the back. Repeat the same steps for the other outline. This is gonna be the darker outline, so you're gonna have to sample the red color and make it darker. This time give it a considerably larger width. Since you duplicated the heart shape, the pixel width is gonna have to be bigger to show through the other outline. And that's it for the full heart. You can group it if you want. But I thought it would be fun to make a couple of other variations, a half energy heart and a fully depleted heart, both super fast to make. Let's start with the fully depleted heart. Duplicate the full heart to the side, ungroup it if you grouped it, and delete the shadow, two highlight shapes, and the actual red heart shape. Now the only thing visible is the two outlines. Select the white outline and give it a fill. What we want is a slightly lighter color than the darker outline, but then also lower the saturation. So after sampling the color of the outline, on top of moving the L slider to the right, move the S slider to the left, and you should get this Bordeaux color. And of course we don't want a white highlight, so give the stroke the color of the fill, just hold shift when you sample. For the half depleted heart, it's also super easy. With the pen tool, drag a perfectly straight line down the middle. You can use a snapping to snap to the nose in the middle, but I'll just eyeball it. This object is gonna be really small, so there is no need to be this perfect. Then finish the shape covering the right half. Duplicate the red heart shape and perform an intersection. Give it the color of the Bordeaux backfill. Let's organize them together like they will be in the final project. I'll use 4 hearts, 2 full, 1 half, and 1 depleted. Here you can use the align and distribute dialog to tidy everything up. Make sure each heart is grouped, otherwise there's gonna be a huge mess. Go to Object, Align and Distribute. Then select them all and go to this button to distribute them all in equal distance horizontally. If we leave the hearts like this, depending on what's gonna be on the background, it may or may not be visible. The same happens with all the other UI elements. The fastest and simplest solution is to give the UI elements a background. And we won't complicate with complex backgrounds. The overall style of the game is super simple, so we'll just use a black rectangle with a lowered opacity for all the UI elements backgrounds. This is extremely simple to make, just a black rectangle with lowered opacity. So instead of wasting time here, we'll draw them in the final illustration so we can adjust it and make it fit better with the rest of the assets. Okay, one last UI element. I want to include a power-up item. Nothing too complex, just a simple icon so the overall UI won't feel as empty. My original idea was to make something like the droppable power-ups from Mario World, where at the center of the screen there was this box that stored one power-up, and you could hit a button to drop it at any time. So I could just put the mushroom power-up that we made in the items lesson But I don't want to repeat myself, I want this mockup to feel more like a real game, so I'll draw a new simplified power-up just for this lesson. This power-up is gonna be the classic fire flower. So with the pen tool, create this long stroke and bend it a little. And give it a fairly thick stroke width. To me 5 pixels was enough. Now, grab the ellipse tool and create an elongated ellipse. With the object tool, rotate it a little. Adjust the scale so this flower part is about more than half the entire figure. Great, now let's make the petals. Since this is a simple iconic illustration, we don't want more than 4 big petals. So grab the ellipse tool and put 4 ellipses in each corner. And when you're done, perform a union with all of them. Now for the inner part of the flower, a couple of ellipses together should work. And now the leaves. This is super simple. With the pen tool, just make this simple leaf shape and duplicate it to the other side. You want to make a couple of quick adjustments so they won't look exactly the same. When you're done, you may want to add a line in the middle to imply the leaf stalk. One last step, I don't like this inclined plane at the bottom of the stem. I would rather to be flat. So this has an easy solution. Just select the stem stroke and go to Path, Stroke to Path. Now the stroke is a path. You can grab one of the nodes with the node tool and make it flat. We wanted the stem to be a path rather than a stroke anyways, since we need it so we could create the outline. And that's it for the shapes. Now let's give all these objects some color to make them pretty. First of all, give the flower a red color. And of course remove the stroke. For the inner shapes, I'll be using a white and an orange. For the stem and leaves, I'll be giving it this green. Again, if you want, you can just stop the video and check the color numbers in the HSL sliders to copy my colors exactly. But I believe that creating your own colors can be more fun, so it's up to you. Now for the shadows. For the shadow of the flower part, I don't want to complicate myself drawing anything. Let's just use the difference technique. You know what to do? Duplicate twice, give the upper shape a different color, move it a bit to generate the shadow, and perform the difference and give this shape a shadow color. For the shadows in the stem, you want a drop shadow below the flower part. So draw a simple shadow and perform an intersection to remove the excess. For the shadows in the left leaf, just make a shadow in the lower part and intersect it. Now here comes the slightly more complex variation. Do the same with the right leaf, but continue down the right side of the stem. Remember that you're gonna have to have the silhouette of the leaf and the stem as a single shape to intersect the shadow shape. So before making the intersection, duplicate the right leaf and the stem and join them with a union. And use this new shape to intersect the shadow in. And give it the same shadow color. We are almost done, but like with all other assets in this mockup, we want to create a darker outline for each part of the asset. So grab the main flower silhouette from the flower part, duplicate it with Ctrl D, give it a nice thick stroke, and give it a darker tone than the color of the shadow. For the stem part, it's made of multiple objects, the stem and the leaves. Luckily, we transformed the stem to a path before, so it's easy to select everything, duplicate it, and perform a union. Now give it the thick stroke and send it to the back. And give it a color darker than the shadow. And that's it, a new power-up. Only that this one is exclusive to the UI. The final step will be to make the background where the item is gonna go. But this is extremely simple, it's just a black rectangle with the opacity lowered and the corners rounded. Just like with the other UI elements, we'll draw them right into the final illustration so we can make any adjustments right there. And we are done with the UI. Because we don't know how the colors are gonna interact with the rest of the background, most probably the colors that we picked aren't gonna be definitive. We may need to crank up the saturation or lightness of a particular shape, so it's more visible in the final image. So we'll have to wait until the composition is done to make some final tweaks, as well as adding the final touches, like the background and the position of the elements.